You are listening to the Lance J Radio Show on Advent Sports Network.
I had the opportunity to be a part of the class of 1996, the illustrious class of 1996. Our class was not very big. We only graduated about 45 people. We were wedged in between two very large and very boisterous classes. The class of 1995, they were 60 plus deep, had some really excellent characters that went on to do some big things. One of them, Myron Edmonds, has been on my show. Some other people are scheduled to be on the show in forthcoming weeks. The class of 97, which Joel Boyce has been on the show, as has Dean Alexis. We all went to school together. The class of 97 had an extreme rivalry with my class. For some reason, they felt that when they were freshmen, they felt that they could jump line over us, who were sophomores, and go directly to being upperclassmen. So, my class, we never had the most popular guys. We weren't the best dressed class. We didn't have the highest Q rating of people on campus. But one thing that my class could do that I would say better than any of the other classes, we had better basketball players than any of the other classes at Pine Forest. We didn't have that one superstar per se, the one guy that was 6'3" and dunking on everyone, but we had 11 or 12 people that could play basketball in our class. Most classes had 2 or 3 guys that were really, really good, and they didn't have the depth. My class was so good that they would do a face-off where the classes would play one another, and my class won as sophomores. They beat the juniors and gave the seniors a real heck of a game. So our next guest, he was part, if you went to Pine Forest to understand Christian education, it was pretty much the same everywhere. We had our own little intramurals and little intramurals cliques for basketball. So our class, 1996, had been the dominant class at Pine Forest in basketball. People that are listening that went to Pine Forest are going to email me. They're going to text me and say that that's not true. But it is true. We were the best. We were the best basketball players. Not me personally, but the class as a whole. I remember coming back for my senior year, 1997, who had been a boisterous class. They had a lot of real cool guys, a lot of popular guys, could never touch us in basketball. I remember when we played our first intramural game, we had our own little team names. I'm not going to get into that. The first game of the season was against our next guest team. We had owned these guys since they were freshmen. And I remember in the layup line, our next guest and some of the other people on his team, which basically was the class of 97, they were all dunking in the layup line. They had all grown over the summer. They were all muscular and in shape. And I remember looking at my boy Josh Livingston, rest in peace, who was kind of the leader of our class's team. I remember looking at Josh, and I remember saying to Josh, hey, these guys are better than us. We're going to be in for a pretty long day. They proceeded to go out and beat us by about 30 points. These guys had worked out all summer. They had topped us in the pecking order, which is the essence of what high school is you come in at the bottom and you're fighting your way up to the top. Our next guest, was a part of this team who referred to themselves as the Manz crew, and that's an inside joke if you with the Pine Forge. They trounced my boys back in the day. He went on to do some things that are much bigger than intramural basketball in high school. Our next guest was the captain of the varsity basketball team and our starting point guard my senior year at Pine Forge Academy. And since then, fast forward almost 20 years, he is now a director of the Office of Legislative Affairs for the California State Attorney General. Her name is Kamala D. Harris. So he is a Democrat, Kamala, excuse me. He is a Democrat, heavily involved in the local legislature. I've seen this guy on C-SPAN. I would like to welcome to the Lance J Radio Show Thomas Lawson, a gentleman who I've been involved with since high school. It's really nice to catch up with you, Thomas. Man, it's been a long time since we've talked.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for the invite. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. I love that story. I remember coming back as a junior, and we did feel like we had made we had jumped some hurdles and had skipped some steps from being underclass and upperclass, and we were ready to make a statement. And I remember junior year was a great year for class of '97. We had a good time.
Yeah, I remember you guys. And I don't want to bore our listeners or not Pine Forge listeners, but I just can't forget. It was obvious in the layup line that my class, we had gotten fat and out of shape and complacent over the summer. Your guys, you and Lamont Perry, Aaron Baker, Lenny Steyer, these guys came in ready to ball. They were not messing around. They had worked out all summer, and they came out and they blew us to smithereens. And when we played them again in the playoffs, in the intramurals, they blew us out again. It was pretty embarrassing how 97 had shown their supremacy. But that's kind of my everlasting image of you guys putting a full court press on us and double teaming Josh, and realizing that none of us could score more than 10 points outside of Josh, and it got pretty ugly. So I want to give you guys your props, man. You dominated us, and I remember that 20 years later. Wanted to bring you in, Thomas, and we appreciate you coming on the show. I wanted to talk about your experience at Pine Forge, and not the intramural component, but actually, what was it like? We've had a chance to interview Eric Cantrell recently, who you know from Pine Forge. We're really starting to crack in at Advent Sports Network to interviewing players, and we have some players from Tacoma Academy lined up to interview, some players from Oakwood Academy. Really trying to expand this podcast. What was it like as someone who's an adult but can look back to years in the past? What was it like going to Pine Forge? How was that experience, and what was that experience like playing basketball for the Green and White?
Yeah, I think that it's an experience like no other. I mean, Pine Forge is a place where I have extreme fond memories of. It also was a place that I think was almost like a capsule. I mean, you can't really duplicate the experiences there, the bonds that you have there, because you're kind of cut off from the rest of the world. And so some of the experiences that I look back on, to me, are even that much more vivid, because I felt like I wouldn't have gotten that going to a regular high school in inner city, pick any California city. So to me, it's even more special. And now that, as I'm back here on the West Coast, understanding and experiencing what it's like to have been on the East Coast during my formative years is also a big part of my experience, which is a little bit different than most folks who have already, a lot of people from Pine Forge when I was there came from, bordering states, but being all the way from the other side, it's also a different experience. But I had a great time. I think, it puts you in a situation where you can become more familiar with your peers, with your teachers, with your coaches, and it allows you, I think, to develop a relationship that kind of is the bond is like no other. I mean, that's just the only way I can really describe it, because I think you get a closeness and understanding of who you are, and they get understanding of who you are, and I think that they're much more inclined to be able to help guide you through those formative years because they have a better sense of who you are. So that's kind of my take on it and my experience.
What would you say, Thomas, was the spiritual influence you gained? And not just Pine Forest, I'm trying to expand the show where it's not just Pine Forest-centric or even Adventist-centric, but if you could elaborate on the concepts, whether it's Pine Forest specifically or going to a Christian boarding academy, what are some of the spiritual components that you are able to have imparted to you at a place like Pine Forest that you would not have had a chance to get access to had you gone to public school or just somewhere local?
You know, I think the biggest difference is just having it intertwined in your daily life, right? I mean, we were going to church all the time. I mean, you know,
all the time.
All the time. I mean, we were there during the week. We were there on the weekends. You know, so it was a normal part of what you do. And I think outside of being in an environment where they foster that, it's very difficult to duplicate that anywhere else. And so trying to make that a part of your everyday life, it should be a little bit easier for some folks. Now, you also get the backlash where it's too much, and folks kind of rebel against that, and they don't want to, you know, have that part of their life where they try to distance themselves. And so, you know, and I've struggled with that, right? Going back and forth, growing up, and, you know, trying to figure out, you know, my spiritual walk and that type of thing. But I think that's probably the biggest thing. It teaches you how to intertwine it into your daily life, where it's just part of something that you do every day, where it's not just this thing you do just on Saturday at 11 o'clock, but it's part of, you know, it's part of going to school. It's part of doing your homework. It's part of after school. It's part of, you know, having fun on the weekend. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just that, you know, spirituality or Christianity can be something that, you know, can be a part of everything you do.
What was it like playing? I was a senior, you were a junior.
Yeah.
We were the first varsity basketball team that Coach Chris Fielder coached, the legendary Coach Chris Fielder at Pine Forest Academy. What was it like being the starting point guard and team captain? And I remember Mr. Fielder used to ride you so hard. 'Cause you were our floor general.
Yeah.
And it was your job to be coach on the floor. And your job was to make sure that everyone else on the team was in the proper place. What did you learn from that experience playing ball at Pine Forest Academy and being a student athlete and getting chewed out by Mr. Fielder in public, in private, in the cafeteria? What did you learn from those experiences?
You know, it's funny you say that, because one of my most vivid memories of playing ball was the time where someone had missed some assignment. I can't remember what it was. And he pulled me out, and I got to sit on the bench. And we had spent probably about, you know, it seemed like forever, but it was probably only 2 or 3 minutes going back and forth because I couldn't understand what the problem was because it wasn't my fault. And then we, you know, I think over the course of the season, especially my senior season, understanding, I think, responsibility, right, and that you're accountable not just to yourself but also to your teammates. And that was a huge burden that I had to get used to and understand. And so it did put a little bit of a different perspective, because I wasn't responsible for scoring 30 or 40 a night. I was responsible for making sure the other 4 guys had their best games and put them in a place to be successful. And so it oddly enough taught me a little bit of selflessness, responsibility, and it's humble you know, because, you know, like you say, you know, class of 97, we were very cocky, we were very boisterous, we were very loud, we were very sure of ourselves. So having that constant check on my character that, hey, you're the starting point guard, you're the captain, this is fun and games, but there's also a responsibility component to it, is something I think that helped me kind of grow up a little bit faster. Maybe some of my other guys who were out there just, you know, being athletic and having a good time. So it did take a while to get used to, but it also helped me understand the game a little bit more than I think I would have if I hadn't gone there and, you know, learned under Coach Fielder.
We'll be back on the Lance Day Radio Show with more of Thomas Lawson. He's talking about his experience playing basketball at Pine Forge. We're going to ask him some questions. We're going to go Rush Limbaugh on it and talk politics for the second half of this interview. So come back and listen after these messages. Lance Day Radio Show, Advent Sports Network.
I wanted to do odd things around the house so I could make some money. And one day while I was weeding the garden, and I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but one day while I was weeding the garden, I had an experience that for most Adventists, I don't know what the listenership of your show is, if I would be something that is...
It's mostly Adventists, but we're expanding.
All right. Well, to all those who are out there, I had an experience that is a little bit in left field for most people. While I was weeding the garden, there was a presence that just stood next to me. I interpreted it as a messenger from God, an angel, and that angel spoke to me and just told me what my life would be. Told me about it. I was not Adventist at the time. Told me about a church that I would join that needed my leadership. Told me about things that were happening in my family that I did not actually know. And then told me that I would leave New Jersey and go back to Toronto. God would honor every promise that he ever made to me from Toronto. And one of those promises was that I would go to school in the States. That was odd. But I went in a moment from having, people always just ask me to describe it. It was a bright light on my left with an audible voice that spoke and just laid out my whole future in moments to me. I went running out of that garden and ran into the house. And I went from being a guy who, my friend's parents didn't know what I was going to do with my life to articulating to them in a moment everything that would ever happen to me and for me.
Sports talk, ministry, excellence. You are listening to the Lance J Radio Show.
Hello, I am Dr. Arlene Archer, otherwise known as The Life Doctor, and you are listening to the Lance J Radio Show on Advent Sports Network. Between juggling my professional responsibilities as a clinical psychologist and independent business owner, and my personal interests as a wife and mother, I make the time to fulfill my passion of helping others through inspirational videos. Join me on my YouTube channel as The Life Doctor, where I vlog on home life, education, health, fitness, and more.
Now remember, Riley, you're not the only one out there. Winning is about teamwork. I remember my senior year at Princeton. We beat Chris Webber and Michigan with teamwork. They still show the highlights of that game sometimes.
Wait, you don't mean
the giddy up, ride 'em cowboy dunk. Yeah. That was me.
Ugh, that's the worst thing ever.
Point is, we won.
That's what you call winning? Man, I hate to see what you call losing.
Hey, I took a charge for the team. We won!
Nah, but it ain't look like you won.
You are listening to the Lance J Radio Show on Advent Sports Network.